You're listening to Sox in the Basement, a production of the Broadcast Basement Limited, where every show is 30 minutes of good and comes from a basement bar on the south side of Chicago. Pull up a stool, pour a cold one, and join us right now for Sox in the Basement. Heard everywhere podcasts can be found, and always at soxinthebasement.com. I think it's very obvious that Chris Getz did not like Yoan Moncada.
But what would tip you off to that idea? Whatever would give you that notion?
I have chuckled hysterically every time I've thought about it since the release was put out. Let's think about the timeline here. One, Moncada doesn't come back and isn't back in time for them to try to move him.
No.
Then the team seems really annoyed with him and they leave him down in the minor leagues as long as humanly possible. Like there was a date where he had to come back up. That's the only reason that they bring him back up, right?
Right, yeah. Their hands were forced by the CBA, basically.
Right. So now he comes back up and they don't play him. They make him sit on the bench, unused, essentially. I think he pinch ran at one point late in the game. They use him for nothing. Then the postseason begins, and you can't make any roster moves. The Dodgers win. The White Sox announce their new manager, and immediately it is leaked out, put out in the press. They get it out there that they're not going to pick up the option of Yoan Moncada. The Stassi thing did not get out right away. Moncada immediately. The next day, you get the official announcement, but they couldn't wait to announce it. We'll get to the rest of our business when we get to the rest of our business, but we want to be the first team in all of Major League Baseball to declare we're not bringing this guy back. It was so stark. Like, I imagine a paid messenger showing up at Yoan Moncada's door that day, and the messenger just dropped off his stuff and was paid to double bird him on the way back to the car. Like, there is such a dislike. That's what I'm picking up. I'm sorry, but I pick up a dislike that's palpable. Like, I don't like my ex, right? Like, she made it a point since the moment we filed for divorce to prove to me that I made the right decision, like on a daily basis. Like, she's like, guess what? You were right. In everything she's done over the last year or so, it's been incredible. And I don't think that I dislike her as much as Chris Getz hated Yoan Moncada.
I mean, the Dodgers, to give you an idea, the Dodgers haven't even had their parade yet. And the White Sox are...
They had their parade. The White Sox had their parade.
They
got rid of Yoan Moncada.
But you're right. I mean, the guy shows up with a box of Yoan Moncada stuff. It's not even his stuff, I'm sure. It's just an open-topped box of random things that you find on a desk.
It's a crate of Yoan Moncada CDs.
Right. Well, that's next year's Disco Demolition Day is going to be Yoan Moncada CDs at center field. But that is, I mean, talk about just the whole way what do you do as Yoan Moncada to piss your general manager off?
Right.
To this level? I mean...
They wanted, the moment they were allowed to do it, they wanted to say, and we're not bringing Yoan Moncada back. If you didn't notice how upset we were with him, with how we treated him after he came back from the injury, if you didn't see the discontent, and look, folks, there were all kinds of whispers that we would hear. You know, people reaching out to us in DMs and people saying that they're around the team, and I don't report everything because I can't confirm it. But there were a lot of whispers that he was not putting in 100% on his rehab and that the team was mad at him. And they thought that he was not doing himself any good, and he definitely wasn't helping the team. He was collecting his paycheck and in no hurry to get back to this team because they were losing and because he probably understood that he wasn't really going to come back next year. I mean, he's not stupid, so why rush back and do anything? And then when he finally gets back, they're like, oh, you didn't want to be here? Now you can sit on the bench. And then they dumped him the moment they could. Like, the way it leaks is one of the first tidbits of the off season out into the public, well before the statement where Moncada and Stassi, both of their options are officially not picked up by the team. Backs up in my mind those rumors, although, I have to say it again, unsubstantiated, unconfirmed, whispers sent in DMs and people that I know that, you know, cover the team or whatever are like, this is what I'm hearing. But this is the stuff I was hearing all summer long, is that there was discontent with him.
But the evidence, the circumstantial evidence surrounding that, I mean, like you said, he doesn't get off the IL. We know that there was things like general soreness being reported. which when you're not hearing something specific medically, the doctors haven't cleared him yet because, we're awaiting an MRI for results or something. Teams are awfully specific with this stuff when they want to be. If they're just sitting there saying, yeah, he's resting because of general soreness, and, they're not even given the cheeky, we salute general soreness thing, it's one of those things where you're like, okay, you can tell by the press releases that this is something that they're not really happy to announce and report. And then just the fact that he never really played when he got back to the White Sox. And this is a guy, they're not showcasing him. They're not giving him an opportunity to show anything on the field, show that he was healthy. And then by releasing him right away also, and being this quick on the trigger, it's also you know what? Go. Somebody wants you, they can take you.
That was a statement jettison. They fired him off into the sun, and it getting put out there as quickly as it did. It was to make a statement. And I was paying attention to the statement. I don't know if anybody else was paying attention to the statement, but I got it. I was like, ooh, look at this. And think about how different the Yoan Moncada story is to, say, the Freddie Freeman one that we're hearing, where they hid the fact that he had a cracked rib. Or was it like rib cartilage was cracked? Like he had a break in his ribs. And they didn't even talk about it. And he already had the ankle thing. And he goes up there and hits a walk-off grand slam and then homers in, I think, every game except one in the World Series and wins the MVP. Played through pain. I mean, what a difference. And it's the same difference that's between the White Sox and, let's say, the Dodgers in terms of how they work. I wanted to share this. It's an incredible quote or actual story that comes from Joel Sherman of the New York Post. The Dodgers and the way that they scouted the Yankees is a lesson to all White Sox fans and to the White Sox and all of Major League Baseball, actually. Not only as to how you should scout a team and use analytics and scouting to defeat them, but it's also a lesson as to why you can't build a team the way the Yankees are built, because you have a flaw, and it was exposed. The vent on the Death Star was wide open, and they had the plans. Here's what the Dodgers knew. The Dodgers told their players in scouting meetings before the World Series that the Yankees were talent over fundamentals. And you're going to hear the Sox preach this thing, because this is a Getz thing, like wanting the fundamentals. I think you're going to see our new manager, Will Venable, say that kind of stuff. You're going to hear this a lot. So this is interesting to hear. This is why the Dodgers felt like they were able to beat up the Yankees. The Dodgers said, if you can run the bases with purpose and aggression, the Yankees will self-inflict harm, as was exposed by Betts, Tommy Edman, Freddie Freeman, etc. The value was very high to put the ball in the play and make the Yankees execute. The scouting department for the Dodgers mentioned that the Yankees were not just the major's worst base running team by every metric, but the difference was vast on the field between them and the Padres, who the Dodgers had just beat in the NL Division Series, but were impressive in this area. They were thrilled at how short Yankee leads were at first base, and that would help with Gavin Lux because he doesn't do well on the pivot at second. It's like the Yankees were bad at something that made Gavin Lux better. Like, this is advanced scouting. This is the way it should be.
That's being bad. That's being bad. If you're making Gavin Lux look good, you're a bad team.
But this is great. This is great scouting right here. This is what you're supposed to be doing. They said their metrics had the Yankees as the worst positioned outfield, which is amazing because I would think the White Sox are the worst at everything. But the Yankees were the worst positioned outfield in baseball, according to the Dodgers. And they were amazed at how many times relay throws come skittering through the infield with no one taking charge, and how often Jazz Chisholm Jr., for example, is always out of place or just standing still when a play is in action. Now, that tells you, first of all, you want to be like the Dodgers. Don't be ashamed of it. You want that. That's what Chris Getz and his front office should aspire to be. You also don't want to be the Yankees, because even though the Yankees made it to the World Series and they're filled with superstars, they are much better than that White Sox team that made it to the postseason with La Russa, right? Much, much better. But that was also a problem. One-dimensional White Sox team, didn't do everything correctly. Fundamentals were poor. I guarantee you, if the Yankees are the worst in the outfield positioning, the Sox aren't far behind them. Like, you can't be the Yankees. Because Chris Getz could go out and get all the talent in the world. And if you are set up like how the Yankees are set up, according to the Dodgers scouts, and this is why they dominated them, right? Because there was talent on both sides. These were two extremely talented teams. The difference was the setup and the type of player that was out there and the coaching and the system that the Yankees run compared to the system the Dodgers run and then the Dodgers scouting. That's how good you have to be to win championships unless you catch absolute lightning in a bottle and have pure luck. And you don't want to be a team that just wishes for that. That's where the Sox have to go. I read that today and I was like, oh, first of all, that makes my baseball heart flutter. Like I felt a hot flash. I was like, ooh, my baseball senses are turned on by this. I'm extremely attracted to these two paragraphs. That's what I was. I was very attracted to these two paragraphs.
It is baseball porn is what you're describing.
Yeah, I want to make out with these two paragraphs. I want to take it home, and in the morning I want to make it breakfast. This is amazing to me. And you want to be that. And you also want to avoid years from now being the Yankees in that equation. For exterior windows, doors, patio doors, storm doors, look no further than Window and Door Superstore of Oak Forest. No high-pressure sales. They're not showing up in your house and trying to get you to buy windows for an entire house based off of what you think of some dingy little example window that's been brought into everybody else's house. No, you go into the showroom. There's an owner there. There's also one on site. Ask all of your questions. See everything in full living colors, all the add-ons, no pictures in a book. There's all Window and Door Superstore installers. They don't farm out the work. They've been doing it this way for 40 years, more than 40 years in Oak Forest since 1985. And all major brands are custom made with no stock items for a perfect fit. They're a half block east of 159th and Ridgeland at 6280 159th Street. Window and Door Superstore of Oak Forest. See more at windowdooroakforest.com. Meanwhile, you want to be more like the Dodgers and not like the Yankees.
Well, and it doesn't take a whole lot. I mean, you don't have to be deep into advanced metrics to watch a team and see that they take poor leadoffs from first base, or they don't run at good times. They don't, they don't have the wherewithal to take the extra base, things like that, or to watch them not be able to throw in from the outfield. But, the advanced metrics of positioning, for example, and how you measure that's a little bit more than the eyeball test in a lot of ways. One of the things that you just have to listen to, and knowing where the Dodgers are as a premium organization versus the Yankees, is how often do we talk about Dodger players and Dodger prospects in terms of their all-around game? Okay, they're going to be good at the plate, but they're also very good defensively. When they're talking about James Outman, who's one of their center fielders, his positioning and his work within the Dodger lineup, like, this guy's got a lot of pop. He's going to, do some things at the plate, but he's also a really good base runner and he's an excellent center fielder. You hear that. When you hear about somebody coming up for the Yankees, they're like, yeah, this guy's got like 40 home run potential. We don't know where to play him, but he's got 40 home run potential. The Yankees do that a lot, where it's just, this guy can rake, but we don't know what the heck to do with him. And you look no further than Aaron Judge, who is not a particularly good outfielder, as it turns out, and is an incredible hitter, though, right? And you can have that, but you can't have 9 of that, in your lineup every day. And you're really talking, too, about a switch over from the Rick Hahn, Kenny Williams, every guy's a superstar, to Chris Getz saying fundamentals first, and then we'll find the talent that builds around it.
I mean, isn't Rick and Kenny's system more like the Yankees?
100%.
And Getz is trying to describe something similar to the Dodgers. Like, look, I'm not trying to tell you that Chris Getz is the Dodgers. I'm not trying to tell you that he's even capable of doing it. He's trying very hard to bring in the right people. Like, he keeps cleaning house in the front office, changing who's in different positions, bringing in people from outside, changing the structure and who reports to who, all the stuff from the scouting. He's trying.
It's not even that, though, right? It's the idea that the Dodgers are doing something that's sustainable. You don't need a lineup of 9 superstars if you're going to have guys that do some things well, that play good defense, that run the bases well, that have fundamentals that help you win. Okay, you don't need 9 superstars. The Yankees model, the old Rick and Kenny model, was 9 superstars. Okay, that's my lineup, is 9 superstars. That all must
stay healthy.
That all must stay healthy because, we don't have anybody backing them up.
We do not have a 10th player.
No, and if you're going to be a high payroll team, which Chris Getz will never have a high enough payroll, not unless or until there's a change in ownership that allows for that. But Chris Getz will never be able to buy the talent the Dodgers have. But what he can do is he can preach the same kind of fundamentals the Dodgers preach. And then as talent develops, if he gets superstar prospects, if guys pan out the way they should, according to their scouting, that's where you can be more like the Dodgers there. It's not about bringing in Mookie Betts and signing him for the rest of his playing career. It's going to be about finding a Mookie Betts in your system, maximizing his talent until such time as you either have to pay the guy and you can't afford to do it, or until somebody comes along and gives you a team for the guy because he's so great. That's where it comes down to. And I know we get into that whole conversation of like, well, you got to trade a guy before you let him go. That's not this conversation for right now. But I have no interest in Chris Getz going out and trying to be the Yankees and trying to give me 9 superstars, because I've seen that. And you've seen what happened with the Yankees this year. Carlos Rodon, not the guy he used to be. Garrett Cole, not the guy he used to be. Right? You get pitchers who fall apart, and if you don't have anybody behind them, it's a problem.
Right. I mean, the Rodon basically performed the same way he performed for us in the postseason. Like he's a really good pitcher, but I mean, in the postseason, I don't know if he's the kind of pitcher you can get on his back and he's going to help you ride through the postseason. And so there were similarities. They're not exactly the same team, but there are these little similarities. Let's talk about the new manager though, because I found this to be interesting. The message put out by the team about Will Venable. Here's the statement, and this went out through White Sox social media, and it's Chris Getz on Will Venable. And of course, this is a prepped statement. This isn't something he says in response to a question from a reporter. They probably sat down and worked this out. There were 7 people in the room. They tried to figure out exactly how they wanted to word this, because they have to rebuild the connection with their fan base who's angry with them. Coming off of the worst season, no accountability. They look like a clown show. You've seen all these articles about their owner. You're watching their owner try to posture constantly. Oh, I might leave, or I might sell the team and somebody might leave it. I mean, like right now, I don't think there's ever been a time where White Sox fans have hated the White Sox more. And so they're doing the best they can. So here is the prepared Getz take on Will Venable. Here it is. A great communicator. Will is going to build strong relationships, set expectations, build a clubhouse where we hold one another accountable, and ultimately create a winning mindset among our players and a winning environment in our clubhouse. And there are words that are highlighted in a different color to make sure you see them in yellow. The word communicator, relationships, expectations, accountable, and winning mindset. And accountable was something that somebody in the room said, you have to put that in there. And my response to that is, that all sounds great. I've heard that before. Prove it. And if Chris Getz really wants to prove it, Ed, it's in his next few moves. You can't tell me that getting rid of Yoan Moncada was you showing accountability. Accountability is also saying that some of these guys who came nowhere near their value over the course of the last several years in wins above replacement, you cannot give them arbitration money that they don't deserve because you're afraid to make changes. You want to show me accountability, Gavin Sheets, Andrew Vaughn, non-tender. A lot of these guys, non-tender, right? Nicky Lopez, non-tender. Although I keep making the argument, there's not a lot of middle infielders and you might get stuck having to bring him back here just to play defense as a placeholder. But it's still a big price for a guy who didn't do anything for you and career-wise shows that he's not worth the money that he's being projected in arbitration. Yeah, I'm all for the statement on Will Venable. It sounds great. I want to believe it. Young manager, highly regarded. All of Major League Baseball wanted him. He decides to come to the White Sox. It's a very low pressure job, right? I mean, he could lose 100 games and still improve this thing by more than 20. And everybody will be like, look at the turnaround Will Venable did as they've lost 100 games, right? Like it's going to be really hard for him to be a bad manager. The honeymoon's going to last for a while, and maybe that's why he takes the job. But all these things and all these platitudes and all the wordplay means nothing if the organization doesn't start making moves that say, you're not good enough to be on the White Sox. We won't accept this. We're moving on from these inconsistencies and this poor play. We don't care if we don't know exactly what the next option is, but we'd rather see Tim Elko go stand at first base and give him a chance because we already know what you are. And that's the next step. You want me to start believing in that statement? I want to see the next step show some backing to that statement.
But it's not just the players. I mean, very few of the players, I won't say none of the players, very few of the players really earned the benefit of the doubt last year. I mean, there are a handful that are there. And then there are some guys that were showing enough promise that weren't really part of the problem that you want to take a look at. So the roster itself, though, when you're talking about the former core, and Yoan Moncada was former core, Eloy Jimenez, who was already traded away, was former core. When you're talking about that core, that needs to be swept away with, a lot of prejudice, and looking at that and going, and some of these placeholder guys like Nicky Lopez or Chris Flexen, they're replaceable. You don't need to overpay them. So if you can't come to an agreement with those guys that makes sense for the team, then don't go to arbitration with them. Don't pay for them. But the other part of it is going to be the coaching staff too. This coaching staff, which is still intact, I mean, yeah, Pedro's gone, but nobody else has been fired as of this moment that participated last year, other than the guys that were let go with Pedro.
And you keep hearing that Grady Sizemore is coming back. I don't have anything against Grady. I like Grady. Grady did a nice thing. Everybody loves him. Grady's a nice guy. I just don't know. I don't know if you're putting your manager in the best position by making him take on the staff and he doesn't get to pick who he wants.
Well, and the storyline so far, okay, and this is Scott Merkin reporting it, is that Will Venable himself is asking what happens to Grady Sizemore. What are you going to do with him? Because he likes Grady. He's heard good things. He's got some respect for him as a former player. He's got respect, whatever. And Getz is telling him, this is Getz talking though. Getz has said early on when Will and I were talking, he asked about Grady. He said, if I were to get this position, what would happen to Grady? And I said, listen up. That's up to you. I'll say that he's admired, and that Will had known good things about Grady, respected him as a player, heard really good things and watched from afar. Will you continue to have conversations on how Grady can fit and certainly take advantage of the skill sets and the traits that Grady has? Okay, if Will Venable thinks there's merit to Grady Sizemore being on his staff,
then fine.
Then that's fine.
Right. I mean, if that's true and Getz is like, it's your choice, and that makes me feel good, right? Like, I want to believe it. Again, I'm like a jilted partner in a relationship, right? Like, I have no trust.
Right.
I have no trust with this team. This team cheated on me so many times, right? Like, this team stole all the money out of the bank accounts, got credit cards that it didn't, that I didn't know about, paid those credit cards with other credit cards, ran us into $100,000 in debt, destroyed the entire family. That's what this team did to me. Like, right? Like, I'm a jilted person who has no trust now for this team. I believe nothing with this team. So I want to believe that, right? Like, I want to believe that Chris Getz is different and that he really is allowing Will Venable to pick whoever he wants to. I want to believe that. But I also have the sneaking suspicion that like 2 years from now, I'll hear some insider be like, well, he never really got to pick those guys. That was all a lie, right? Like that's what I worry about.
Well, and you start to worry if you see coaches sticking around that for a fact were problematic, okay? If you start seeing guys that you're sitting here going, okay, there's a history with them and the White Sox and the bad version of the White Sox, why is this guy still here? That's a thing that you start to call into question. If Grady Sizemore ends up as a bench coach or a base coach, something like that, okay, whatever. That's something that you can sit there and go, yeah, I guess I can kind of see that. If Ethan Katz is still a pitching coach, if Will Venable doesn't bring in somebody to completely change what they were doing as hitters, somebody from outside the organization, somebody that Will Venable himself seems to have had history with. If there's nothing there that says this is a Will Venable guy, somebody that he may have played with, somebody that's from an organization that he would have played for, something that is not, a guy that you kind of hear, well, this guy was tied to the White Sox this way. If you have a bunch of minor league coaches coming up through the White Sox organization and they form Will Venable's coaching staff, you'll know exactly what this is. If the house is clean, though, both on the roster and on the bench, if the house is completely cleaned, then you still have to give Chris Getz the benefit of the doubt that he is doing things a different way, that this is a different version of the White Sox front office, that this is a different version of how a general manager and a manager can get along for the White Sox, because that's something we've not had in a very, very long time either, at least not from a competent manager or a competent GM standpoint. I'm looking forward to seeing what happens next and what decisions are made. And I think the decisions that are made will be some obvious, but the decisions that aren't made will be just as telling. Because if Andrew Vaughn is still standing at first base come this spring on his arbitration contract, and he's gotten a raise just because he's been around, and the White Sox are overpaying him, and Tim Elko is fighting for an opportunity at a bench job, or there's plenty of guys that are there that can play first base or be a DH that are fighting for a roster spot that was guaranteed to a guy that has underperformed his expectations since he was brought up. And you can make all the excuses in the world for why that is, but this is not a new leaf being turned over at that point.
No, it's not. And now what we're going to look forward to, and I'm going to tell you, I was telling somebody the other day, everything comes back to life now, right? Like, this is one of my favorite times doing Sox in the Basement, because now we're going to get so much happening here. We've got general managers meetings beginning on Monday in San Antonio. Venable's going to do an in-person press conference on November the 8th, and we're going to see moves happen. We're going to see things occur. Who are we doing arbitration with? Who are we declining options are? And you know what? You know what else? You're going to see stuff from around Major League Baseball that's going to make you laugh. So before we get to the Sox nerd, this is one of my favorite stories coming out in just the last hour as we're sitting here. Remember Jordan Montgomery and him signing with the Diamondbacks?
And the Diamondbacks GM saying it was the worst mistake we've ever made?
And the quote was, "Horrible, our biggest mistake."
Yeah.
He just exercised his $22.5 million player option, and they're stuck with him another year.
Lovely.
I love it.
Oh, well, isn't that great for the Diamondbacks?
The owner did everything in his power to say, "We don't want you, go away." And he, very similar to what the Sox did to Moncada, he probably had a messenger show up with his signed option, drop it at the owner's door, and put up the double birds on the way back to his car. I'm imagining a lot of moves that way right now.
Anything that happens this fast, anything that happens immediately after the World Series ends is absolutely a double bird to either the player or the organization.
It's double bird season in MLB. Wrapping up the show with our friend, the Sox nerd, Dave Marin, who puts all the tidbits up on the scoreboard at The Rate, and he's brought to you by the Village of Lamont. Want to experience a downtown with real history, great eats and drinks, and green spaces filled with adventure? Visit the Village of Lamont. Shop, dine, drink, explore. Check out holiday events like the Downtown Lamont Ornament Walk on the 23rd of November, and see it all at lamontdowntown.com. Nerd, what do you got for me?
Chris, here is a look, Sox nerd style, at new Sox manager Will Venable. What is it about White Sox managers and October 29th? The news of Venable's hiring as Sox manager broke on October 29th thanks to frequent Sox in the Basement guest Scott Merkin. The scoop came on the 68th anniversary of the Sox hiring Hall of Fame manager Al Lopez and on the 4th anniversary of the Sox rehiring Tony La Russa. Counting interims, Venable's hiring marks the 10th time in the last 12 hires the White Sox have picked a manager with no major league experience. The only two managerial veterans the Sox have brought on board since 1992 are Rick Renteria and Tony La Russa, the sequel. Venable owns a degree in anthropology from Princeton. The Sox have had many bench bosses who went to college. Grifol went to Florida State, Ventura went to Oklahoma State, and Jeff Torborg, my favorite, went to Rutgers. But only one Sox skipper attended an Ivy League school, and that was Hall of Famer Eddie Collins, who went to Columbia University. Venable has coached under some accomplished managers. He served under Joe Maddon and David Ross of the Cubs, the Red Sox Alex Cora, and the Rangers Bruce Bochy. All but Ross have won a World Series title. Speaking of World Series winners, Venable's last big league manager was Dave Roberts for the 2016 Los Angeles Dodgers. Will Venable is the first son of a big leaguer to be hired as White Sox manager. Max Venable, Will's dad, played for the Giants, Reds, Expos, and Angels from 1979 to 1991. As Sox nerd follower Marty Masachek pointed out, Max Venable was a ninth-inning defensive replacement in the August 25th, 1990 Lee Stevens game at Comiskey Park, where the Angels torpedoed that beautiful Sox season. Will Venable played for the Padres, Rangers, and Dodgers between 2008 and 2016. One of the best games of his career came at Guaranteed Rate Field on May 31st, 2014, when he hit sixth in a Padre lineup that also featured Carlos Quinton and Yonder Alonso. On that Saturday afternoon, Venable was 4 for 4 with 2 doubles, a run, a steal, and 2 RBI, in the Padres' 4-2 win. He joins Toronto's Shannon Smith, who did it on August 21st, 1997, and Houston's Alex Bregman, who did it on August 18th, 2022, as the only visitors to the rate with 4 hits, 2 doubles, 2 RBIs, and a steal in a game. Before I get to my zinger, a reminder, you can access my blog at soxinthebasement.com, and there is plenty of Sox nerd material on Twitter. My zinger, Yoan Moncada will depart the White Sox 4th in franchise history among third basemen with 66 homers behind Ventura, Melton, and Creedy. He also leaves 3rd among Sox switch hitters with 93 homers behind Valentin and Durham. That's it, Chris. More than you probably wanted to know about Venable, the Ivy League, and the out-the-door Yoan Moncada.
Sox in the basement. Sox in the basement. Sox in the basement.
Sox in the Basement. Heard everywhere podcasts can be found, and always on soxinthebasement.com.